In chapter 12, we're going through the benefit determination process. So this chapter lays out what benefits are, why we provide them, and then how you administer them in an organization. And in chapter 13, we'll go through specific benefits, which I think will be very informative for a lot of you. So we think a lot about benefit costs because we can't control labor costs if we don't also control benefit costs. So benefits, as we'll see in a graphic in a couple of slides, that benefit costs are actually increasing over time. So in order to sort of control labor costs, we have to think about what benefits we're providing and how much they're costing us as an organization. Employers, like other parts of compensation that we've already talked about, would like the cost of benefits to fluctuate with revenues and profits rather than have it be a fixed cost that's the same year after year or even slightly increasing year after year. Because when it's a fixed cost, what happens is during good economic times, the organization can easily pay for those benefits. But then say a recession happens or something like the pandemic happens in 2020, all of a sudden you're providing a lot of benefits, but your organization might be struggling financially. And so now the benefits have become a cost that is not helping you make more money in your organization. One way that we can control labor costs, or one thing we can think about when we're controlling labor costs, is that different employees value different benefits, which should help inform what kinds of benefits we offer our employees, but also may lead us, as most organizations are starting to do, provide more flexible benefits where employees get to choose the benefits they use, so that we're not wasting our money on benefits that maybe some employees don't need or don't care about. We can also use benefits to differentiate ourselves or our organizations from competitors. One obvious way of doing that is offering different kinds of benefits than other organizations do in your industry or field. And this is where you've seen tech companies, for example, who are offering things like cafeterias, dry cleaning services, game rooms, that sort of thing. That's a way for them to differentiate themselves from other tech companies that are all competing for the same employees. Another way, however, to be competitive with benefits is to actually do benefits just more cheaply so that you can provide more benefits for the same price that perhaps your competitors are doing, but they can't provide as many benefits for the same price. So that is a really, you can think about competitiveness in two different ways here for benefits. So just a graphic to show you how benefit costs have risen over time. I would say on this graph, the more important bars to look at are kind of dark bars. How much is benefits of the total compensation package? And you can see it's almost a third now, when it was really only like 15% in 1955. So those benefits have become more important to employees, and they're rising, at least as a proportion of total compensation, much faster than wages and salaries. Organization size also matters for benefit costs, and there's a couple of reasons here. So as you'll see, the first column shows establishment size for all. So that's like the average amount of total compensation and then wages and salaries and benefits. And you can see these percentages that for all organizations, benefits and total compensation are about 30%, which is what we just saw in the last graphic. But when we break it down by organization size, smaller organizations, so here it's establishment sizes of 1 to 99 employees, their benefits are only 26% of their total compensation. So just a little over a quarter of the total compensation package is benefits, and they're actually paying less for those benefits. So 778 versus establishments that are 500 or more employees, they're paying 1888 for those same benefits, and it's 35% of the total benefits are of the total compensation. So why is that? One is that larger organizations have more competitors. They have to compete in a much larger market with other large organizations. So a lot of you, if you don't have a job now, may graduate and work for organizations that other people have heard of. They're large national organizations or large regional organizations. So one way that they compete is by providing more and different benefits for employees. The other thing is they also provide lots of different benefits because they have so many more employees. And since employees each have kind of their own preferences on benefits, the more variety of benefits you offer, the more likely it is you're able to attract different kinds of employees to your very large organization. Another reason is that smaller employers, and some of you might have experience with this in your current employer, or you've worked for a small firm before, or some of you might even be in families that have family firms. Smaller firms just cannot afford the kinds of benefits that larger firms can. They don't have the size advantage. They also just don't make the kind of revenue and profit that a lot of large organizations do. They don't have public shareholders that can help pay, for some of these benefits. And so they have to be much more careful about how they spend their money on benefits. They spend less of their money on benefits than they do for wages and salaries just because they have a lot less available. So why did benefits grow? During World War II and the Korean War, the U.S. federal government instituted wage and price control. So they controlled the price of like things like food staples, materials like aluminum and steel, but that also meant that they controlled wages too. So you couldn't increase your wages for employees, even if they were doing a good job, because you were trying to put a lot of that money and time and effort into the war effort. And so with these wage and price controls, employers had to think of new ways that they could attract employees or keep their employees and compete with other organizations in their industry even. And so that's where they started looking at benefits because they could provide benefits that was outside of these wage control laws that the US government had. And it was a catalyst then for creating pensions or retirement systems, healthcare coverage, time off, and other kinds of benefits. The other thing that was happening at the same time is in 1935, the federal government passed the Wagner Act, and it gave a lot of rights to unions to unionize in organizations and then to negotiate compensation for union employees. And because of that, unions were able to play a much larger role in introducing different benefits into the workplace. And so they provided, a lot of them fought for pension plans, which we'll find out in chapter 13 is not the kinds of retirement plans most of us will have in our organizations, but we're very good to employees. Supplementary unemployment. So if you were unemployed, supplemental unemployment increased your unemployment benefits, extended vacation days, and guaranteed annual wages. If any of you are interested in this, there are some historians who actually look at the role of unions in providing benefits for employees and the way that they've actually affected the structure of work today. I only know a lot about this because when I lived in Wisconsin, it was one of the first states to have lots of unions and one of the first states to have a lot of these kinds of benefits because of unions. So it's really interesting to see how these two kinds of events happened at the same time that led to the kind of workplace that we're in today. Benefits are also really cost effective in two different ways. One is that employee benefits by federal law are not taxable. So an extra dollar in pay or in wages is not the same as an extra dollar in benefits. If you increase someone's wages, eventually they might go into a different tax bracket. So actually they may not make more money even if they have a wage increase. But if you put that money into benefits, that will not happen to any employee because they're not taxable. So you can provide even more benefits for that same dollar than you can for wages for a lot of employees. Another thing is that you get group-based benefits by buying these benefits as a group, as an organization, for example. And so for a lot of individuals, there are some benefits that they either couldn't afford on their own or that they just get a better price by doing it through their organization. Health insurance is kind of a classic example of this. Before we had the Affordable Care Act, some people weren't even eligible to get health insurance because they had pre-existing conditions. So things like chronic diseases. And so they were unable to even get health insurance. Well, if you have a chronic disease, you can imagine you really do need health insurance because you're going to have a lot of doctor's visits. You may have lots of medications you're taking. You may have treatments and surgeries that you have to go to, and those are all very expensive. So the Affordable Care Act at least allowed people who have these pre-existing conditions to be eligible for insurance. But if any of you have ever tried to get an insurance plan on the Affordable Care Act on the health systems, depending on which state you're in, if it's the federal system or a state run system, they're not necessarily affordable plans. They're still quite expensive. Even if you don't have a pre-existing condition, they can be quite expensive. And so by getting health insurance through your employer, the employer usually pays some amount of that health insurance, but the cost of the actual plan is a lot less just because they're buying as a group. And that group's going to include some healthy people and some people who need more of those health benefits, and that reduces the cost for everyone. Also, group insurance has relatively easy qualification standards. So if you do have an chronic disease or something, you often don't have to have some kind of medical test to get that insurance if it's through your employer, where you might have to do that if you get an individual plan on your own. There's also government impetus for growth in employee benefits. So over time, there have been some benefits that are now mandated by state or federal governments. So there are three that our book lists. One is workers' compensation. That is mandated by every single state, and employers pay for workers' compensation. Workers' compensation is an insurance plan should you be hurt or if you become ill on the job. It helps pay for the compensation that's lost from your recovery. The federal government requires unemployment insurance and that all employers actually put money into that system, but states regulate those systems. So each state has their own rules around who's eligible for unemployment. And you could see a lot of this during the pandemic. I'm sure many of you noticed more states made it easier to be eligible for unemployment. So they were increasing unemployment payments, and unemployment's usually based on how much money you made in the job that you had before you became unemployed, how long people could take those benefits. And then they also decreased requirements like you didn't have to look for a job necessarily or have proof that you were looking for a job to take unemployment during lockdown in 2020. So states could change the rules when they needed to. And then Social Security is a federal program. Employers provide half of the Social Security payment and employees pay the other half. And for most jobs that are eligible for Social Security, there are two kinds of jobs that really aren't. People who clean houses and farmers. There is a history behind that. I may explain that in chapter 13, why those two jobs are kind of excluded. Most of you will be in jobs that have Social Security. So then you're giving into the system. And then when you retire, the system will provide you some kind of regular payment every month for your retirement. Most employee benefits are also affected by laws. One example of a law is the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, or ERISA, which has a lot of laws or regulations around retirement plans in organizations. For this chapter, you don't have to know any of those specific laws. I just want you to be aware that a lot of what HR does with benefits isn't just helping to choose benefits and costing out those plans for their employers, but also to make sure they're complying with the laws around those different kinds of benefits.